Well, hello, my name is Roy Cohen. I'll be hosting today's very special edition of Community Forum for your entertainment and information. We have two guests that I'm sure you've heard of their names before. To my left is Sheriff Michael Bellotti from Norfolk County. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much
It's
for
a
having
pleasure.
me. Thanks, Roy.
And far across the table, away from me, as far as I can get him, is an old friend, Bob Stutman, who's the former head of the Northeast Region Drug Enforcement Agency. Welcome.
It's always a pleasure, Roy.
Thank you, and thank you for coming. If I can spend a couple of minutes with some introductions, I'd like to do that. Bob, he ended a 25-year career as one of America's highest profile DEA special agents, 5 of which he worked undercover. As head of the DEA's largest office in the world, New York, Bob became so visible that Pablo Escobar had one time targeted him for assassination, thankfully unsuccessfully. Bob has been featured on hundreds of national television shows and has been a drug consultant for both CBS and PBS News. His autobiography, Dead on Delivery, was published by Warner Books and was the basis for the television movie Mob Justice. Bob's been a drug consultant on several films, including Traffic, Training Day, Blow, American Gangster, and most recently the Netflix original series Narcos. Bob was named Man of the Year by various national and local enforcement agencies. He attended the JFK School of Government at Harvard University. He's traveled with the DEA to 73 countries, a lot of miles.
A couple.
Frequent flyer miles.
Yeah.
And met with dozens of heads of state, including Anwar Sadat of Egypt, Pope John Paul II, and he's met and discussed drugs with 3 sitting presidents, George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, and Bill Clinton. He's been named Outstanding Speaker of the Year by numerous medical associations and was recently invited to speak at MD Anderson, the highest ranked cancer hospital in the world. And he presents over 100 presentations a year, providing programs to medical and dental professionals, schools, and parents. It's quite a schedule you used to keep.
I used to keep.
Slowing down. And to my left is Michael G. Bellotti. He was elected High Sheriff of Norfolk County on November 3rd, 1998. He was officially sworn in on January 6, 1999. He ran unopposed in November 2004 and began serving his 4th 6-year term in January of 2017. He is the 18th Sheriff of Norfolk County. As Norfolk County's highest-ranking public safety official, Sheriff Bellotti is responsible for the safe, secure, and humane custody of more than 700 criminal offenders in Dedham, House of Correction, and the pre-release center, which I believe is in Braintree.
In Dedham. There was one in Braintree, but that's the youth camp now. But there's actually a pre-release center right next to the main facility in Dedham.
Okay, as well as the electronic incarceration program in Quincy. Sheriff Bellotti also operates the Braintree Public Safety Complex, where he runs many of his community programs for youth and senior citizens. It's also the location for staff training in the Sheriff's Youth Leadership Academy, Future Captains Basketball Academy, and after-school program. The Sheriff's Civil Process Office is also located at the Braintree site. During his 2nd term in office, Sheriff Bellotti launched 3 major public safety initiatives. The first is a detailed list of level 3 sex offenders on his website, www.norfolksheriff.com. In addition to viewing this information, Norfolk County residents may also register through the website to receive personal email notification every time a level 3 sex offender takes up residence or becomes employed in their community. Sheriff Bellotti is the first in the state to offer such a service. The second initiative is Project Lifesaver, which you can get into rather than my reading it. The third initiative is the Sheriff's Repeat Offender Public Safety Initiative. You could spend the whole hour reading the resumes. But welcome to the both of you, and I'm sure that we will not run out of things to talk about. Bob, I understand you recently took a trip through the Boston area, and You observed something you'd like to talk about?
I did. I've been in the drug business for 50 years. I've been shot at 4 times. My best friend was a DEA agent who was assassinated on the job. So I've seen it and frankly done it all. Something struck me 2 weeks ago in Boston that made me just stop and say, are we in America? Boston, as everybody here knows, has about 750,000 people. It is a medical center of the world. It has one of the higher socioeconomic numbers in the country. It's not a poor city. It is home to about 56 colleges and universities, including abutting to Harvard University. And yet, when I got off the train in South Station, I saw trash cans all over the place, Gina. I saw trash cans all over the place, and on them they had ads for Narcan. And I said, is this America? Here we are in one of the most well-to-do, most high-caliber cities in the United States, and they've got to advertise Narcan so people don't die from drugs. And I just said, this is crazy. This is not the America I grew up in.
I noticed that it's not in English.
They had them both.
They had them both.
They had them
Spanish.
both. And English, yeah.
Now this is for people, they use that for people who...
Narcan is a drug that if you overdose, it will bring you out immediately. If anybody saw the movie Pulp Fiction, where they stuck that needle in her, except it's a spray, and it will save your life. But to me, the point, Roy, is that we have to have that ad. Boston is not a poor city. It is not an uneducated city. It is one of the jewels of America, as far as I'm concerned. And yet we have to have a sign that says, if you overdose, make sure you have a Narcan and make sure somebody calls 911.
Do you have your own personal Narcan, or is that usually used by law enforcement?
Actually, no, it's carried by law enforcement. DEA agents carry it now because some of the drugs that they're playing with, fentanyl particularly, carfentanil, are so strong that the slightest breath can overdose you.
There was a report of 3 police officers, I think, recently were exposed to the fentanyl.
Right, yeah. It was actually a drug called carfentanil, and that's not unusual.
You don't have to ingest it. I guess you can touch it.
No, you can touch it or just breathing it in the air.
Wow. So who's the poster aimed at? Who's the target?
The target is the American drug addict, and today the American drug addict is white, suburban, middle to upper income, all ages. This is not the drug problem of 30 years ago. It is a completely different drug problem. It started with doctors who overprescribe opioids, and then younger adults or older adults run out of the opioids given to them by doctors or given to friends, and then they turn to the street drugs. I love working with high schools, talk to about 50,000 high school kids a year, and when I talk to kids that have an opioid problem, I always say to them, how did it start? How did you start using opioids, OxyContin, Vicodin, Percocet, etc.? And the 2 answers I get all the time, sports injury, and the other one, when I first heard it, fooled me, wisdom teeth. Vicodin, post-wisdom teeth, and these kids are dependent in 3 days.
Wow. That was one of my questions, what is an opioid? But you pretty much explained it. What drugs are opioids?
OxyContin is probably the best known, Percocet, Vicodin. An opioid is a synthetic opiate. An opiate is heroin. It's a natural drug. An opioid is a synthetic. And this is a completely different drug problem than, look, when I was a street agent, I actually worked with with Mike's dad. For me, this is great. I've known you since we were 12. I've known Mike's dad since the mid-'80s, mid-'70s. So this is like coming home. When we worked drugs, very often on cases with Mike's dad, I knew who the dope peddlers were. There were two worlds, honestly, cops and dope peddlers. Today, I don't know who they'll lock up. I don't know who the dope peddlers are anymore. The majority of people who are drug addicts start with pills from doctors. 80% of today's heroin addicts first started with pills from doctors. I just read a number last week that dumbfounded me. 40% of Americans take opioids to control pain. 40% of Americans. Wow. Now, let me compare that with Europe. You know what the number is in Europe?
No idea.
7%.
Okay, why the discrepancy?
Because exactly. American doctors are simply over-prescribing. And I'm not blaming them. They were taught in medical school that pain is the fifth vital sign, which is an absolute craziness. We are one of only 2 countries in the world that allow advertising by pharmaceutical companies directly to the consumer. How many times have your viewers seen ads for 100 different pharmaceutical drugs? All those ads really give one message. If you've got a problem, take a pill.
Yeah, they also have a message on that if you take it, watch out for the side effects.
But nobody pays attention to that. Oh. Nobody pays attention to that. So we are one of only 2 countries in the entire world that allow that. The other one is New Zealand. So we advertise to the consumer, take it. We tell the doctor that pain is a vital sign. And to me, the craziest thing is, you know how most doctors now get bonused or paid? Not based on patient outcome.
Prescriptions?
No. Whether or not the patient liked them. That is absolutely crazy. Most doctors are now bonused or paid based on what we call quality surveys. A quality survey basically says, did you like the doctor? If I go see Mike and he's a doctor, frankly, I don't care if I like him. I want him to save my life. But he is not based, his bonus is not based on whether or not he saved my life. It's based on whether I liked him. So we have forced doctors into this position, and we are one of the few countries in the world. We have 5% of the world's population. Last year, we prescribed 86% of the world's opioids and 95% of the world's Vicodin.
Unbelievable. Now, haven't there been some modifications to the law which mandates how doctors have to prescribe the numbers of pills? Instead of giving a patient 2-week supply, maybe they give them a 2-day supply, that type of thing?
Every state is trying different things. We are a long way from where we have to be. Let me share one crazy fact with you. Veterinarians get more training on pharmacology than MDs do. So one of the things we could do is make every medical school train about opioids. Most doctors get very little training about opioids.
That's not good. I guess there was an article, a story on CNN about deaths linked to opioids are skyrocketing. And so is the number of Americans doing the drugs.
Yeah, let me give you an analogy. Numbers don't mean much to most people. The average commercial airline crash over the past 10 years has had 129 people die in every crash. That's the average over the past 10 years. 162 Americans die every single day from drug overdose.
Wow.
Can you imagine if we had, Roy, a commercial airline crash in the U.S. every single day, 365 days a year? We'd stop flying. Honestly, we'd ground the airlines. And yet we have more than that die from drugs. The sheriff's jails are filled with people who are there because of drugs. Our entire society has changed because of drugs. And again, I think it's important to know these are our kids, meaning these are not gangbangers. These are suburban kids who have a lot going for them, and they get started on drugs given to them by physicians. And again, the physicians are almost forced into it.
Can the physicians be blamed for this, or can they be charged for doing things like this?
If they're terrible, of course they can be.
I mean, like the bar rooms, if they oversupply a customer with drinks.
Yes, and there are some physicians. The problem is it's the practice of medicine. Those doctors are taught that pain is a vital sign. And the problem is there are 4 of the vital signs that can be measured. Nobody can measure pain. They're in a tough position. I really am not blaming doctors. They are put in a terrible position because of the craziness of what we do in this country. The problem is we're killing our own kids, our own adults. You know, the number one cause of Americans dying under age 50 or below, drug overdose. Huh? This is America. The leading cause of death of Americans 50 and below is drug overdose.
Wow.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
I checked out your website, and I saw that you created a letter and sent it to the Attorney General.
I did.
And
Recently?
Yeah.
yeah, it's called From One Old Dog to Another. Incarceration didn't work. I'm sorry, Sheriff.
It's okay, I'm with you on that page.
There you go.
You're barking up the wrong tree. If I'll read a little bit of it. This, Dear Attorney General, this memorandum establishes that your policy on charging and sentencing for the Department of Justice will not succeed. An incarceration-based reaction to drug use in our society is costly and is a vague service to public safety. I'll make that simple. Incarceration doesn't work. Been there, done that. I was once head of the DEA's largest office in the world, New York City, under the Reagan and Bush administrations. I fought the first war on drugs. I lived through the LSD elevation, the birth of marijuana inclination, and most importantly, the cocaine and crack epidemic. Some have said I was the face of the drug war. An observation proved right when in 1998, Pablo Escobar put a hit on my life for seizing several tons of his cocaine and holding up his headshot at a press conference. Back then, we thought what we were doing was right. I dedicated my life's work to locking up drug offenders. DEA agents willingly gave their lives believing the same was true. Incarceration was rationalized on the basis of its assumed effects, that imprisonment would deter offenders, reduce crime, get rehabilitation for the imprisoned drug abusers, and give retribution to the victims of drug violence. It didn't happen. There's now a considerable burden of evidence indicating that incarcerating drug offenders doesn't rehabilitate or deter crime. It has minimal effects on the reduction of crime. And then the last paragraph that I'll read. We were dead wrong. At best, I have seen incarceration increase the prison population of nonviolent offenders while doing nothing to reduce drug use or increase public safety. Yet, year by year, I've seen the death toll rise of drug abusers in America. When I retired from the DEA in 1990, approximately 8,500 people died of a drug overdose. In 2015, drug overdose was and still is the leading cause of accidental death in the United States, with 52,404 lethal drug overdoses. People are doping and dropping like flies.
Yeah, and I always get asked if I'm optimistic or pessimistic on the drug issue, because I really have lived through a lot of drug issues, and I'm absolutely pessimistic. I don't talk politics. The following are facts, they're not politics. The Attorney General has said that we are going to ramp up and use mandatory minimum sentences at the highest level for everybody arrested for a drug crime, including nonviolent drug offenders. Excuse me, I did that. It filled up
That's unbelievable.
Mike's jails, jails like his. It did nothing else but fill up jails, number one. And number two, the the president said 5 days ago, all you got to do is tell kids, this is literally a quote, all you got to do is tell kids that this stuff, opioids, is bad. It's really bad. Excuse me, I lived through Nancy Reagan's just say no. It didn't work. This is a very complex issue that needs law enforcement, treatment, and prevention people working together. Putting it all on him does no good for this issue. It simply fills his jails up.
It's true. I was amazed when Attorney General Sessions, right,
Yep.
led with that statement almost right after he was sworn in.
That's exactly
It is
correct.
so counter to what is occurring on the street level, even with elected officials who you arguably are late to the game, but they're in the game. I noticed several years back, the most conservative, whether you're Democrat or Republican, but typically the most conservative Republican on the federal level was finally talking about treatment
Right.
and reentry and using those buzzwords, which shows you how much the whole thing shifted in that direction. To hear Attorney General Sessions lead with that, where there's really nobody other than folks who have this kind of old world view of what punishment is in the correction system. And we know that you need jails. They're going nowhere. But they've been overstuffed with nonviolent offenders for the past several decades. My count, in some ways happily, is down from an average of probably like 650 down to like 550, even lower, because there's so many more intermediate sanctions. With the advent of more of these specialty courts. So we had things like drug courts years ago, right? Now they have
Right.
veterans courts, mental
Right.
health court. I actually sat through a mental health court, and I saw just how difficult that offender was to deal with. I mean, it was really an eye-opener. These are people, because they do have mental health issues, and some folks, have some special needs issues, and they used to be in a courtroom with
Right.
50 other people, and the judge would just probably give them special attention, but there wasn't a centralized focus on how to handle this particular offender. This is an example of the system hopefully is changing. So now you have a judge who is treating like a drug court. They're a little more understanding of the issues these folks are dealing with, how a lot of time it's nuisance crimes or it's drug related, there's not a lot of violence there, and they're more geared to connecting with resources in the community instead of a judge saying, look, it's really not my issue if you have mental health issues. I just know that you technically and clearly violated the law, the statute. And the laws can't take into account a lot of the, that's why the mandatories are tough.
That's right.
I have opposed mandatories to the chagrin of the DAs. They see it as a tool, so I can't argue with them because they don't want to lose any tool in that courtroom. Because they'll tell you that a lot of these guys have been given 9 chances and opportunities. But my theory is, if you take away the mandatory, you're giving the judge a little more discretion.
Exactly
So
correct.
you got a young kid who's been caught with possession. Maybe he's not a dealer, but he's got enough pot that technically could be called a dealer, cocaine, and shame on him. Or he's got an addiction, him and his friends are trading, distributing to each other. And then he gets arrested, and then the prosecutor says, you're looking at 2 years, or 3, in either state, 5, 10 years, or House of Correction, definitely 2.5 years. So you might as well just plea to a lesser charge. So now his record starts building, and granted, he deserves that type of stigma, I guess, on one level, because stigma is part of the deterrence. But so now this kid is agreeing to things he wouldn't, other than the mandatory and the threat of it, and the lawyer saying, hey, if you go to trial, I can't guarantee. So that's why I think mandatories don't work. And so back to the mental health court. So now they're dealing with that population in a more focused way with resources right there, and the probation officer, they're all geared. So now you have the veterans courts. So now you have a veterans court with a judge who will hear those cases maybe once a week. It's Judge Hogan Sullivan in Norfolk County, and she now knows, the judge, and everyone in that room understands there's resources there. there's housing. We can get them signed up for health care. If they have some type of disability or mental health issue too, where they might, might not be tied into a doctor in terms of the right meds, if they're bipolar. I'm not talking the pain relief, opioids, but so it's a better management team for these guys. In the old days, the perception with the public was, hey, these guys kind of did it to themselves, right? And
right.
if we lose a couple of them, whatever. It's not in my backyard. Now it's in everyone's backyard.
Now it's our backyard.
The heroin. It was in the alley. It was the junkie. It was the urban setting. And now that it's hitting everybody, everybody's on board. We're doing all these forums, which are great. But it's like, what are we really doing? And you say you're pessimistic. I mean, if you read any national studies, they're saying we're going to be cycling out of this thing for another 10 or 15 years, and it's going to get worse. All I can do as sheriff is, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a doctor from the Harvard School of Mental Health. I mean, I use all that expertise. My focus is, as much as I try to be a little bit holistic, is what do I do when these guys come in here?
That's right.
And second they come in here, we see what their deficits are. Sometimes they lack a GED. Because if you leave the jail and you can't be hired or even write in a Home Depot application in high school, the chance of picking up again increases. It may not be the primary cause.
Absolutely.
It's
correct.
it's also how you're wired. But all these things come together. So we look at all the deficits and we do our best to tie them into outside stakeholders, social service providers, recovery homes, healthcare clinics, mental health nonprofits, so that when they're leaving the jail, they've already met these 3 or 4 folks, and hopefully they might still be under my jurisdiction under the bracelet. We do have about 20 or 30 beds that we have access to that we can step inmates into, still under my jurisdiction in the community. And they are now working more closely with these folks instead of, here's $5 for the bus, you've been a great inmate, you did the AA, you did some anger management, but you have no connection to the outside world in terms of resources. So you're going to go back to that house or that neighborhood or your buddies, and you're not going to be able to fight that. Even doing what I say that we try to do in terms of shifting money without new money, so that we have all these contracts with folks with these offenders, and there are 4 or 5 areas, right, that lead to recidivism. It's housing, it's mental health, it's healthcare, it's vocational, it's a lack of a GED or more of a degree, and of course substance abuse is part of that too. So if you don't connect them to that, even then though, the way the brains are wired after many years of using drugs, and I guess, and I'll turn it over to Bob, where this ends up, I think it's just an incredible, holistic approach. Can we scare kids away from drugs? I mean, years ago, I think my generation was scared. I was born in '63. We saw what happened before us. And then it morphed into something else. And I remember my first few years in high school seeing a couple of kids, who I went to high school with. Great kids, good athletes. It was like the athlete. What's happening? And this is when people were knocking over drugstores, remember?
I do.
And that's kind of gone by the wayside because I guess
They don't need to. They get
Right.
it from a doctor.
Right, and then it morphed into that, and then when they can't afford the pills anymore, it was heroin, right, for the bag. And the whole Narcan thing, the Narcan thing is double-edged sword, don't you think? Well, it's because we're promoting this drug that is a kind of a wonder drug that brings people back from life. In the old days, if you're lucky, you were in the emergency room and you woke up, your family was surrounding you, you may have been embarrassed, but it actually was an eye-opener. It was like a mini intervention, but they lost too many. So now you have Narcan, people bounce right out of it.
Absolutely.
And they want to literally, a few hours later, they're looking for that drug again. They don't even know how close they were to death.
Right.
But what do you do? It's such an epidemic, and everybody is now being trained. We have a program at the jail where we're training inmates with Narcan as they leave and giving them access to Narcan, which is almost sending the wrong message. But we're in such a catch-22 with this.
We are in a catch-22.
And there was a time when if you suggested the concept of Narcan, and then I'll finish here, to law enforcement 20 years ago, they'd say, no way. We arrest the bad guys. We don't rehabilitate. We're not social workers. Now, because of public pressure and maybe more progressive chiefs, and these younger kids coming out with a different view of the world because they've been pounded and pounded, they've had friends they've lost. But it's still a tough thing for police officers. The toughest job on the road right now is police officer, because you're running into a crowd in the old days, you were trained, right, to protect.
Absolutely.
Now it's, you're going to be a sociologist, you got to watch out, you're being filmed, someone takes 10 seconds of a film, right? No one knows what led up to it. They're social workers and they're police officers. And that training, you have to keep training them, right? And you have to make them as well-trained and professional as possible. It is going to be a very different, that's why I think more of them are standing down. You know, not in Boston, but you see what happened in down the South recently. You know, what do? If they go in there with the batons, it looks like they're picking on innocent people who are just protesting. But there's a mob, and nobody's listening. So if they stand down, people could get hurt. It's a real
tough situation.
It's a tough situation.
So let me tell you what you just heard.
Sure.
Seriously. You heard a highly respected, and I mean that very seriously, state law enforcement, local state law enforcement, county law enforcement person saying locking them up doesn't work, doesn't solve the problem. You've heard somebody who spent his life at the federal level say that. We're cops. We carry different badges, but we're cops. And we're saying law enforcement is not the answer. And unfortunately, our Attorney General is saying law enforcement is the answer. Mike mentioned something, I'll put the number to it. Study released 2 weeks ago that said over the next 10 years, 650,000 Americans are going to die from drug overdose.
What can we do to stop the craving? I mean,
Multi-fronts, right? Multi-fronts.
Multi.
So, and I'll ask him this, because, you know, I've never heard anybody say, and we've all had addiction around us. I've never heard anybody say, geez, I gave up my habit because I couldn't get drugs. To me, like, never once.
No.
That's astounding to me, even though I should know the culture and understand why that's so. But even, not one kid ever said, but somehow that subculture, it's like a permissible subculture in some ways. But if you attack it by arresting every addict, it's not going to work. But so deterrence doesn't really work. But I mean, there's a kind of, no one's ever said, geez, I can't get drugs. No matter where they live in America, they'll always find it.
You cannot arrest, we as Americans cannot arrest our way out of this problem. You have to stop kids from using it before they ever use it. And then once they start using it, you have to treat them. We don't throw diabetics in prison. Nobody cures diabetes. It is never cured. We deal with the symptoms.
Right.
Drug addiction is a disease that we may never cure. We're completely changing the way we think about it. We may never cure the disease, but what we have to be able to cure are the symptoms. We have to make these people a fundamental, rational part of society again. So it is a very different world. There was a headline 2 years ago from both the FDA and CDC that, again, as a cop, much older than Mike, but same world, that I never thought I would ever see. Here was a headline from the CDC and the FDA. Abstinence, stopping using completely, is not necessarily the goal of drug and alcohol treatment. Think of what that says. There are now treatment ways where we give the drug addicts certain drugs.
You like Suboxone?
Like Suboxone, exactly. Suboxone, Vivitrol, etc.
That's a real conflict with us. We're grappling with it at jail.
It's a tough...
More and more jails are doing it.
Yep. It's a tough...
And I don't know if I can argue with it. We haven't done it because of that public safety core responsibility we have. So, you know, there were folks who are in the community who get Suboxone. Or methadone, right?
Or Vivitrol.
Or Vivitrol. Well, in Vivitrol, that's more of a blocker, right?
Yes.
Right.
And, it is a blocker.
They don't get a high from it.
No.
But the other two, they still get it. The methadone, they get something.
Yeah, they get well, the theory is methadone, you give them enough to keep them at a physical dependence,
right,
but nothing else.
Okay.
Same thing with Suboxone. You control the physical dependence, but they don't get high from it. That's the theory of it.
And there are a lot of federal grants out there that are encouraging folks
Absolutely.
like us to start implementing that type of program, that's considered a treatment now, which is, hey, I'm not going to argue with that if that's an option for folks. But we're having a hard time grappling with, geez, how do we bring in those drugs and start treating offenders when we're trying to keep it out through the mail
Yeah, I
and people
understand that.
sneaking it in through deliveries, or we still do contact visits.
It's going to be.
It's a real diametrically kind of opposition of positions here where.
And yet, I will tell you, Mike, that despite everything I thought over my years, being in 50 years in the drug world, that's where we're going.
Right.
That's where the country is going.
What do you think? Are you conflicted about it, or do you have?
I was for a while. Now, one of the things I learned since I speak mostly to physicians, you got to go where the science tells you.
Right.
And I follow the science, and the science now says that medically assisted treatment, Suboxone, methadone,
Vivitrol.
I happen to like Vivitrol best, but all three of them, medically assisted treatment has a much higher rate of recovery than the AA method.
Right.
You're stopping the craving.
You're stopping the craving, you're making people a functioning part of society. Yeah.
What bothered me is again, a story I remember reading about recently with, I believe it was a lady who overdosed and she was treated with the Narcan. And about 2 or 3 hours later, she overdosed again and had to again be treated with Narcan. So
Right.
obviously something's not working there.
Yeah, it's not having the psychological impact.
All Narcan does is stop the death. It doesn't stop the drug addiction.
Part of your letter towards the end says to the Attorney General, it's, trust me, cost-effective treatment alternatives to incarceration exist at every step in the criminal justice process. Treatment is the new modern weapon of the 21st century.
Correct.
Did you get an answer for this letter from the Attorney
Former
General?
DA, New York and Boston. I know I wouldn't.
I mean,
I'm a D.
Yeah,
He thinks I'm setting him up, but
Who were you? I mean,
no, I did not expect to get an answer, nor did I.
well, that's a shame.
Well,
I mean, either he cares or he
you
doesn't
know,
care.
you're talking to a guy, Roy, who's been shot at. So not getting an answer to a letter doesn't upset me.
Well, I think the effort that you're putting in to help solve the problem is worth a response, especially from someone who's under attack by the person who put him there.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, you
You
got to
know,
do
Roy,
something.
for me, you've known me for a lot of years. For me, this is a passion. I do it because I think it's important.
But it seems that a lot of politicians represent certain constituencies, and tough on crime is, certainly something that I could see Trump, for whether he believes it or not, is where he is. But this seems so beyond the pale.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to build any more jails. Nobody wants to put non-violent offenders in jail. I don't get where on what level is he getting advice from? Who in this day and age is even suggesting?
I think it's between his ears.
Yeah,
Personally.
yeah.
I don't think he's listening to anybody. But
Well,
that's a whole different subject.
He's not going to be successful though.
I can speak. I will only speak to the drug world. They know nothing about what they're talking about vis-a-vis drugs. I won't talk to anything else. That I can
Right.
guarantee you. They don't have the slightest clue of what they're talking about vis-a-vis drugs.
Shouldn't he assemble the folks who would know more about it and try
Well,
to come up with
Baker's on the committee.
Yeah, but well,
The
he
governor.
did. Chris Christie is the
The
the chairperson. They did. What will be followed through with, I have no clue. I am very pessimistic.
that would be a great constituency for him to start building coalitions.
Absolutely.
You got Chris Christie, you got Charlie Baker, who clearly is not on board with this guy, but they could find some common ground on this issue. He could transcend a lot of the the politics, the partisanship, by making this issue. It politically, it's stupid. Never mind, it's wrong substantively. It doesn't make sense politically what he's doing.
Look what's going on with the business folks that he assembled. They're all peeling off.
I know.
And that's a shame.
Because we still want to see this guy govern. You still want to see
Of course, we all want a president
him.
succeed.
You want to see people rally around him on
Don't
certain
get me
issues.
started on politics. Let's
I'm not-
let's
Let's
talk
move on.
about drugs.
How many, what percentage of the inmates at the Dedham jail are in for drug problems?
Well, I mean, national studies, and then when we do our anecdotal studies, and a lot of it's self-reported, anywhere from 78 to 80 plus. Some people say as high as 90, but
Percent?
yeah, but high 70s for
Yeah,
us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dual diagnosis too. They do have about 25% will have a mental health issue.
Yeah, Mike's right on the money. It's about 80%,
Yeah.
give or
And
take.
sometimes we do our own little anecdotal kind of snapshot, and it's always right, hovers around 78, 80. Yeah.
Is your new facility, well, new, it's 20 years old, is it overcrowded?
No, well, it's always been overcrowded because it was built for 302 design and capacity, and but we're at our lowest numbers in years,
Which is?
which is today it's probably probably say 490, 510. That's been the range. So, and I think that's because there's a recognition
treatment is
in
away.
judges and even DAs don't feel as much political pressure to put everybody in jail. There's acceptable allowance for this intermediate sanction, whether it's intermediate coming in, you're on probation. If you violate, you're going to jail, but you're going to put you in one of these drug courts or veterans courts, or probation with, I have a day reporting center. I run with probation in Quincy. About 30 guys report from there, from Quincy, and a few females. And or the other intermediate, and they come to me, and we try to step them down quick, which isn't always easy.
Let me say something that will get some of your listeners upset. I truly believe this. When crack became the addiction of choice in America, 85 to 94, the answer was throw them in jail,
Correct.
right? Am I right?
Yes.
Now that we have a very similar addiction, higher numbers, but an addiction,
Different demographics.
different demographic, the answer is give them treatment. Now here's my question. If the crack addicts were white and the opioid addicts were African American, would we have treated them different? I think we would have.
Mm-hmm.
I think personally that the way we handled crack turned out to be extraordinarily racist. And now that it's white kids, we are treating them. I'm all for treating them.
Right, it was criminalized.
Right.
In a lot of-
Exactly, Mike. That's exactly right. We criminalized crack, and it should have been treated just like the opioids, as Mike said, are beginning to be treated today. We need to treat these people. Addiction is a disease. That's not Bob Stutman saying it. That's the American Medical Association. That's every group of physicians in the world now say addiction is a disease. We do not throw diabetics in prison because they can't cure their disease. And I will argue with you, we should not throw addicts in prison because they can't cure their disease.
So where do you put them?
You don't have to put them anywhere. You give them medically assisted treatment.
Yeah, but you have to force them to take.
No.
Well, you get them in front of a judge, and you put all kinds of conditions, which some people will say are too many tripwires, but that's where we are now.
That's what drug treatment courts are for. Mike described them perfectly. That's exactly what drug treatment. You say to somebody, Roy, I'm giving you two choices. I'm going to turn you over to Mike, and he's going to throw your butt in jail, and you're not going to have a fun time, or you're going to go to treatment, and you're going to follow all of the mandates of treatment, and you get a choice. Most people pick treatment, and treatment.
Some don't, though.
No,
as you
of
know.
course some
They
don't.
don't.
They don't want the tripwires. They want to do their time.
Some don't, but the majority do.
Right.
And if you do it right, treatment works. But it's got to be done right.
I would think that after they were given the medicine, they started to think rationally they would accept it.
Not always that easy. It's a very tough disease.
What do you think that with methadone, that eventually they, because, it's my understanding, because, once they get beyond the jail, we have no control of them.
Right.
But just people don't end up in jail, but they end up in a methadone clinic. Wouldn't you think, if not the reality and or the goal would be that eventually they would get off that. But it seems like that's not happening.
No, you're absolutely right. Originally, the first methadone maintenance clinic started in 1967 in New York at Beth Israel Hospital, and it was meant to be exactly as Mike described. You keep them in treatment, you keep them in psychological treatment, you keep them on methadone as long as you have treatment, and eventually you wean them off. What we have bastardized that to is now we just keep giving them methadone. I am a much bigger believer in Vivitrol, which is a blocker. It's a once a month. And Suboxone, if used appropriately, I'm not a big fan personally of methadone because Mike's right. It turns out to be a substitute drug rather than a treatment drug.
But it keeps them
Who
alive.
covers the cost of a drug like Vivitrol? Yeah,
So, I mean, at the jail for us, initially we did, and then we did receive a few grants from the state because there was more attention on it. We've been doing it for a couple of years. Sheriff Cummings in Barnstable started,
Right.
was the first sheriff, and then, so we find it in our budget. It's like, I think for us, I don't know, it's about $900, $1,000 a shot. Am I, did I have the number right?
Yeah,
800?
it's now about, it's lowered a little, but
Yeah.
that's about right.
Yeah, so we will find the money in our budget.
The
And
bottom
we
line
probably
is
have 30
somebody's
guys.
going to pay for these people. Somebody's either going to pay for them staying in jail at how much a year?
You know, the number's probably 55,000 now.
Right.
Depending how you
So
look at it,
somebody's either going to pay,
at least.
I'm locking you up at $55,000 a year, or I'm going to give you Vivitrol once a month at $1,000 a month. You know, I can be a very conservative politician and figure those numbers out. So this is, you know, Mike said it exactly right. Politically, what we're doing makes no sense. Forget the fact it makes no sense as far as working goes. I just don't get why we're doing what we're doing. But unfortunately, that means the drug problem is going to get far worse. And please understand one thing. If we do this show, and for me this has been terrific getting to see you and knowing this guy's dad so well, if we do nothing else, I hope the people in Stoughton understand these are your kids. They are no longer the gang kids from downtown Boston.
right.
They are no longer the kids who would just as soon kill you as look at you. These are our kids. Let us be clear. They are white, they are suburban, they are middle income. And if you pretend this isn't happening, it's going to get worse.
Now you're retired.
Well, I give 120 speeches a year.
Yeah, but is there a retired DEA agents group that gets together to come up with these ideas to promote them to an attorney general who hopefully would listen?
Absolutely. There are 8,000 DEA agents that belong to it, or police officers who worked on task forces with DEA agents. So there are 8,000, and the answer is yes, and we're trying, and we also honestly do a huge amount of charity work for agents or police officers who've been killed in the line of duty for their family. I go out and do speeches. If a group comes up with a lot of money, then I'll go out and do a speech for them, etc. So we try our best, but we're not the boss.
Are you frustrated?
Of course, don't I act
I
frustrated?
remember what you used to have hair on top of your
Yeah, you remember that, Roy. Yeah, of course I'm frustrated. A girl, I may have told you the story last Sunday. A girl came up to me at a high school I did maybe 6 months ago. I was in the parking lot, and a girl comes running up to me with all her little friends. And she was a freshman in high school. She said, "Mr. Stutman, do you remember me? You spoke to our middle school." And of course I didn't remember her. And then she hugged me and she starts crying. And she said, in front of all her friends, she said, "My brother died of a heroin overdose 4 months ago. He asked me to use heroin with him. If it weren't for you, I would have used the heroin and I probably would have overdosed." And that's why I do what I do, Roy. Because
That's a nice story.
But the problem is there are 10,000 that you don't save. And that's the problem. You know, I'm not a personal friend of Mike's. I was of his dad. But my guess is he's frustrated. Of course we're both frustrated.
What's the goal?
Well, I mean, again, from my view of the world and my little niche in terms of a little bit corrections, we're thick spoken on that, because a lot of these people don't end up getting incarcerated. But I think we just got to figure a way to, even in corrections, we spent $500 million, DOC spends $500 million. We're going to figure a way to shift some of that money into the community, because there's not going to be a lot of new money on this. We'll get some, but within the system, probation, parole, us, the courts, you know, how do we, instead of always waiting for that federal grant or the $1 million or that earmark for that new program, we just got to, working with the unions, because people, you know, because some jobs are going to be shifting outside, you're going to have less security folks. We need to find a way as sheriffs, and I think this is a microcosm of everybody else, is how do you shift the existing resources?
I agree. I agree.
And that's hard, because I got 220 guys in uniform. Whether I have 90 offenders in that unit or 30, I need 2 COs there. So there's an economy of scales issue, there's a fixed cost issue, but we really have to lose the pride of authorship, the turf battles. Sheriffing is going to change, and if I don't admit it and my guys don't admit it, and we play tough cop, you know, talk about immigration, which is great, but that's not what we're there for. I'm a jailer. You know, and I'm a social service provider, and I gotta get creative, as we all do. You know, the governor just gave out I think a $400,000 grant to about 5-6 sheriffs, which is great. But at the end of the day, that's $100,000 each in budgets that probably total $200 million. You know, it's great. The Global do a Metro Region story on it. It looks like people are focused. It reinforces the message. But if we're not shifting $500,000, $2 million in the next few years into the areas of intermediate sanctions, then, you know, then we're going to be stuck in an old paradigm, and it's not going to be helpful.
We all have to think different. That's what Mike's saying, and he's right on the money. Every one of us have to think different. Not necessarily easy. I know we did get a time constraint. We have to think different, which means things like AA are not the only answer to the drug and alcohol problem.
It's a spoke. It's a tool.
That's exactly correct. He used the right word. That's a heretical statement for me to make. I get attacked for saying that. What Mike said was right on the money. Every one of us have to sit back and say, we got to think different.
We do a lot of cognitive behavior treatment, and the AA guys, it's always a little bit of conflict between the old world counselors
absolutely.
and the guys saying, you think this addict cares about how his brain's wired? So, you know, you got to do it all.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break towards the end, and you can both think of what you can conclude at the end for about a minute and a half. We got some sponsors or people that we like to mention the public service, and here they come.
Hi, it's Gary LaPierre, and the crew wants to thank Maxie's Delicatessen. That's at 117 Sharon Street in Stoughton. They're 781-341-1662. American Cancer Society, yes, they're looking for volunteers. Drive cancer patients to and from their treatments. 1-800-ACS-6662, or just go to www.cancer.org. Ilsa Mark's Food Pantry in St. Anthony's Free Market, 2 Park Avenue in Stoughton. For more information, call Christine Gallagher. That's at 781-341-0611 or 781-341-0549. Meals on Wheels. Just ask for Jessica. You'll find her at 781-344-8882, extension 2. Stoughton Penny Saver. Our business is advertising your business, they tell us. 27 Rose Glen Street, Stoughton, 781-344-4833. Community Forum showtimes in Stoughton. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at 6 p.m., Monday at 8 p.m., Tuesday at 5 p.m. It's on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 28. All comments and suggestions welcome. Contact us at communityforum1@yahoo.com. Samaritans, they're at 41 West Street on the 4th floor in Boston, 02111. Their phone number is 617-536-2460. 24-hour helplines for Samaritans, and the number is 877-870-HOPE. That's 877-870-4673. Samaritans, you can find them at 800-252-TEEN. That's 252-8336. Or find them online at SamaritansHope.org.
You're going to have less than a minute.
I'll go first. I'll go 32 seconds.
Oh, the Hometown Business Show. I'm sorry, I was talking to the guests. The Hometown Business Show, you got to watch it. It's Tuesdays at 11 a.m., Wednesdays at 5:30, Thursdays 8 p.m., Sunday at 7 p.m. Comcast 9, Verizon 28. We feature businesses in the town that we'd like to give you a little bit of exposure. Next, Monday Night Bingo at the Ahava Torah Congregation, 1179 Central Street in Stoughton. The doors open at 4:30. The game started at 6:30. And next week I'll be there as a caller. So come on down and maybe you'll win some money. Get Fresh is Stoughton's own cooking show. New episodes coming soon. They just finished a whole bunch. Comcast Channel 9, Verizon Channel 28, Mondays at 5:30, Wednesday at 8 o'clock, Thursday at 9, and Friday at 5 p.m. The Stutman Switowski Group. Bob Stutman, our guest for today. You can reach him at Robert at the Stutman with that's a tough name, Bob. Stutman.
Not her fault.
Group.com. Phone number 716-969-2579. If you'd like to have Bob come as a speaker, he'd love to talk to you about it. Michael Bellotti, the other guest of value here today, Norfolk County Sheriff. M. Bellotti at norfolksheriffmass.org, norfolksheriff.com. Phone number 781-751-3300. Facebook.com/Norfolk Sheriff. Twitter @Norfolk Sheriff if you want to get in touch. That's the end of the show.
Thank you, Roy. I
both very
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure
Appreciate
to see
it
you
very
both.
much.
My pleasure.
Look forward to
Mike,
the next time.
great seeing you.
Bob, good to see you.